Inside Berlin's Bendlerblock on the night of November 12, 1943, two of the Wehrmacht's brightest minds sat in uneasy silence. Cigarette smoke coiled upward in the dim light, drifting toward the ceiling as the faint hum of traffic echoed along 76 Tirpitzufer, the heart of German army intelligence. At a large oak desk, Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, head of Foreign Armies East, leaned over a scattered pile of captured Allied papers. Across from him sat Colonel Alexis von Wren, his counterpart from Foreign Armies West. Both men were known for their methodical brilliance, analysts who trusted in logic, data, and reason above all else. But what lay before them was not a battle plan or intercepted code. It was something far worse, a truth so cold and absolute that even their analytical minds could not soften its impact. The documents were not secret plans or cryptic intelligence. They were mundane American logistics reports, bureaucratic forms filled with typed signatures, delivery numbers, and supply tables. Boring at first glance. Yet buried within those endless rows of figures was the most devastating realization of the war. Germany was losing not on the battlefield, but on the balance sheet. Gehlen's eyes fell upon one particular requisition form, a supply record from the U.S. Fifth Army in Italy. It detailed the monthly consumption of a single American corps: fuel, rations, shells, spare parts. As he traced the numbers, the color drained from his face. "This cannot be correct," he muttered under his breath. Von Wren didn't respond. He had checked the data a dozen times, cross-referenced it with every available source: aerial reconnaissance, agent reports, and neutral shipping records. All confirmed the same chilling fact: the Americans were outproducing Germany not by double or triple, but by orders of magnitude. A single U.S. corps in Italy had consumed over 3.2 million gallons of gasoline and nearly 1 million gallons of diesel in just 1 month. For comparison, Army Group Center, with 500,000 men and 3 full field armies fighting for survival on the Eastern Front, had received less than that amount of fuel in the same time. In that smoky Berlin office, the two colonels exchanged a look of grim understanding. The conclusion was undeniable. Germany was no longer fighting the Allies, it was fighting arithmetic itself. And arithmetic, as Gehlen whispered, always wins. This moment of realization had been years in the making. Back in 1940, long before a single American soldier had set foot in battle, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress and declared that the United States would produce 50,000 aircraft a year. In Berlin, the announcement was met with laughter. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring reportedly sneered, "Americans can build refrigerators and razor blades, not war machines." To the German elite, Roosevelt's words were mere bluster. Propaganda meant to rally morale. After all, in 1939, the U.S. Army ranked 18th in the world. Its tanks were outdated, its army minuscule, its factories filled with assembly lines for cars and kitchen appliances, not tanks and bombers. But beneath that image of softness slept an industrial giant, waiting to awaken. The Great Depression had left thousands of American factories idle and millions of skilled workers without jobs. Assembly lines that once produced tractors and automobiles could be retooled overnight to churn out tanks, engines, and artillery. When Roosevelt called for rearmament, America didn't need to build an industrial base. It only needed to turn the lights back on. Germany, by contrast, had been operating at full capacity since 1933. There were no idle machines, no spare factories, and no reserve labor to draw upon. Every expansion demanded new conquests, new construction, or the use of forced labor, all of which drained precious time that Germany no longer had. For a while, this imbalance remained hidden behind early victories. In late 1942, when American troops first landed in North Africa during Operation Torch, German commanders dismissed them as inexperienced amateurs. At Kasserine Pass, Rommel's battle-hardened Afrika Corps drove the Americans into retreat, inflicting heavy losses. But then something strange happened. Within days, those same battered American units returned to battle, fully re-equipped, fully supplied, and seemingly endless in number. Rommel couldn't believe his eyes. He wrote to Berlin, astonished that each American infantry division seemed to possess more trucks than an entire German corps. Supply convoys rolled endlessly across the desert. Captured American depots contained more fuel and food than some entire German armies. Rommel warned his superiors in stark terms. Even if German tactics win the battles, American logistics will win the war. Berlin brushed aside their warnings as pessimism. Hitler sneered, insisting that willpower and courage would always triumph over mere material strength. But by 1943, that illusion was crumbling fast. When the Allies stormed into Sicily and later advanced into Italy, German troops suddenly found themselves confronting an enemy whose resources seemed almost limitless. Captured American soldiers told stories that left German interrogators speechless. Tales of tossing away entire meals simply because they didn't like the flavor, or abandoning vehicles over trivial mechanical faults because replacements were so easy to get. At first, the Germans dismissed it all as boastful exaggeration or Allied propaganda. But then came the evidence. Captured supply manifests, properly typed, signed, and verified beyond doubt. What they revealed was staggering. The Americans weren't just well supplied. They were operating on a scale that made German logistics look like something out of a bygone century. Von Wren and Gehlen spent countless nights buried under mountains of data, desperately searching for an error that might undo what the numbers were screaming. But there was none. If a single American corps in Italy could consume that much in 1 month, and there were dozens more scattered across North Africa, the Pacific, and soon Western Europe, then the outcome was inevitable. Every recalculation led to the same brutal conclusion. America's industrial power eclipsed Germany's entire war production many times over. The U.S. could replace in a single month what took Germany half a year to build. Cut to archival footage. Tanks rumbling down assembly lines. Factory doors opening to rows of gleaming aircraft. In 1941, the U.S. had built just over 4,000 tanks. By 1943, that number skyrocketed to over 37,000. Germany, even pushing every factory to its limits, managed only around 11,000. The story was even bleaker in the skies. In 1942, the Luftwaffe produced roughly 15,000 aircraft. The Americans rolled out 47,000. And by the next year, they doubled it again. 85,000 planes built in 1943 alone. By the time Germany hit its own production peak in 1944, America had already surged ahead, turning out nearly 100,000 aircraft annually. And then there were the Liberty ships, perhaps the most unbelievable reports of all. German analysts refused to accept them at first. How could the Americans possibly construct 10,000-ton cargo ships in just 6 weeks, sometimes in under 2? Shipbuilding had always been a slow, painstaking craft. But reconnaissance photos didn't lie. American harbors were teeming with rows of nearly identical vessels, a fleet born faster than the U-boats could sink them. By 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively over. Not because the U-boats had failed, but because American industry had made them obsolete. Back in Berlin, Gehlen finally shoved the last report aside. Exhaustion etched into his face. Across from him, Von Wren sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the dim lamplight flickering over the piles of paper. These were men trained to find order in chaos, to forecast outcomes with cold precision. But the clarity they'd uncovered now offered no comfort. They realized they were no longer facing an army that could be beaten with superior tactics or raw determination. They were facing an entire civilization in motion, a war machine capable of producing faster than Germany could destroy, of replacing losses faster than the Reich could inflict them. In that quiet Berlin office, filled with smoke, scattered papers, and the faint buzz of electric lights, the truth settled over them like a sentence already passed. Germany's defeat was no longer a matter of if, but when. The war had stopped being a contest of generals and strategy. It had become a war of industry. And industry, vast and unyielding, had already chosen its side. America's victory in World War II wasn't forged only on the beaches of Normandy or in the skies above Europe. It was built in the roar of factories, the hammering of shipyards, and the endless rivers of steel, oil, and ammunition that never stopped flowing. For men like Gehlen and von Wren, the realization came not from propaganda, but from cold, merciless arithmetic. Every calculation, every report, every dwindling supply pointed to the same undeniable truth. In the end, Germany wasn't defeated by soldiers on the battlefield. It was conquered by numbers, by the relentless logic of production and the mathematics of war itself. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping World War II stories, and share this video to keep history alive, one story at a time.